Independence is middle class blasphemy. We are all dependent on one another, every single one of us on earth. Welcome to It's a New Day. My name is James Young, and today my guest star,
Scott Benjamin, the president of Charles Settlement House.
Roseanne Leckie, Senior Coordinator.
Kelvin Austin, Program Coordinator.
First, we'll start with you, Scott, because I played such telephone tag with you to finally get you here. Can you give us an overview of what the Charles Settlement House is, the departments that are there, and just a brief overview of what you do?
Sure. Charles Settlement House is a human service agency that serves Northwest Rochester. We just celebrated our 95th anniversary. We were founded in 1917, primarily in the areas, the neighborhoods north and south of Lyle Avenue. We have been on J Street for 93 of those 95 years. And now we have facilities on J Street and also on Parkway, just north of Lyle. The kinds of things we do, we have a family services department, which in short provides casework and emergency food and clothes to residents of the area. We have a senior program that includes a senior center that provides meals, socialization, and a lot of health and wellness activities. Our youth development program is very large. We have programs serving elementary age kids after school through teens and summer employment, a variety of programs and activities under the youth side of things. And we also do neighborhood capacity building. Some people would know it as community organizing. Our biggest program founded by the Health Foundation, or funded rather by the Health Foundation, is Project Coach, where we're specifically working in the neighborhood to create a healthier neighborhood by working on the social determinants, things like the housing and the crime and people working together on community gardens and things. So those are the major areas that we're in today.
I just want to ask you very briefly, once again, I'm not sure if you can answer this question because you weren't here 93 years ago, but are conditions worse now than perhaps maybe when the settlement house first started? I'd like to believe that perhaps maybe the settlement house was started for people that were in need, and perhaps maybe it was the thought that probably this would just probably go away. But how do you see from the beginning, are the needs more today? I mean, are we worse off financially or economically?
I think the neighborhoods we serve, from what I know historically, there's more concentrated poverty where we are in our particular neighborhoods than there was at that time. When Charles House was founded, and settlement houses in general mostly were located in immigrant neighborhoods. And in our case, we were serving Italian and German immigrants. Okay. Part of the neighborhood is still known and was known as Dutchtown. The Josanna neighborhood, J Orchard Street area, as it's known now, had a lot of Italian immigrants. So the difference was these were working class families that had moved to Rochester, didn't know the language, the customs, and so the programs were geared around a lot of those kinds of things, providing activities, providing the social networks, helping them get jobs and learn English and things like that. Over the years, the population has changed, and we're part of, when you look at the broader part of Rochester that is oftentimes referred to as the Crescent, we're in that area that's really very concentrated and entrenched poverty and crime issues. So it's different than it was then.
So basically, a lot of, I would assume, the original intent has changed to deal with modern technology as well as the modern neighborhoods and the conditions that the neighborhoods are in today?
Well, it's definitely changed. If you even look just socially at how things were at that point, those immigrant populations, the fathers may have gone to work, the mothers were at home, but you for the most part had two-parent households, and the kids were sent off to school and so on. At least up through middle school or a little older. At that time, it wasn't that uncommon for kids to stop going to school and start working and so on. So it's changed in some ways just because society as a whole has changed. As people built successful lives in the neighborhoods, a lot of those people then moved out to the suburbs and new people came in.
Let us begin now to talk about some of the programs. Would you please explain to us the program that you're involved with at the Charle Settlement House?
I am the coordinator of the senior program. It is a 5-day-a-week program, Monday through Friday. Our population is 60 and over. It's a diverse population with disabilities and cultural differences. We do meals. We have like breakfast and lunch daily for a donation, evening dinners once a month, excuse me. Case management is provided there. There's exercise class, yoga class. We have a room with treadmills and exercise equipment. Really big craft class. We do a lot of volunteer opportunities. This year, our seniors crocheted Afghans, and we donated them to VNS of the Meals on Wheels program. Okay. It really is a home away from home. It really gives you a purpose to get up in the morning and someplace to go with your peers.
I would imagine that's really got to be a lifesaver for many people, because if you're widowed, if your children no longer live in the area, and then too, just simply becoming older. I mean, life changes, and to be able to have these opportunities where one can go and still be quite active. You're saying, how many people do you actually have that come through? I guess maybe on a weekly basis or a monthly basis?
Well, last year we served 297 unduplicated seniors. Okay. We're averaging about 52 meals a day. There's breakfast and lunch. We have a satellite also at Dunn Towers that provides meals only for seniors. It's just diverse. People just come in maybe for coffee, come in just to talk. It really gives them a purpose. We try to keep them motivated to do activities. There might be a person who's blind, and we have a person who is able to see, who will take them downstairs and guide them on the treadmill. We have people who have developmental disabilities. Since a lot of programs have closed, they've come into our program. People from Evelyn Brandon come to our program. And they might feel uncomfortable in the beginning, but they always want to volunteer or give back. It gives them a really purpose. They're not ready to die. They're just ready to live. And so we hopefully encourage them that they still have opportunities to do whatever they want to do.
And I believe now people are living longer.
Oh, yes, definitely, definitely. These are the really frail, and they're mostly from our community. We have transportation that does pick up.
Okay.
This year we did a big project with Food Link, and we planted our own garden, community garden.
Where's that?
Right on Parkway. We have 4 or 5 beds. The seniors themselves dug the garden, planted, maintained it, and half of what we grew went to Charle Settlement House food cupboard, and half they kept themselves.
Very good.
It was a wonderful program.
And now let's go to the other end of the spectrum, and let's deal with the youth. Please tell us what it is that you do.
Well, I oversee the teen department, and we work with teens between the ages of 12 to 21. And basically they come together. We do provide transportation to make sure that they come to the program safe, and we make sure they get home safe as well. Tuesdays and Thursdays from 6 to 8 p.m. We serve them a hot meal. They have rec time, but then we also have different clubs and workshops about at-risk behavior. Okay. They've just got through, the kids I work with this year just got through doing a 10-week block on STDs, because right now currently in Monroe County has the highest rate of STDs in New York State. So we're just being very proactive. And with the kids that I work with overall, and I know that there's a lot of misunderstanding with teens in general, because what we tend to see downtown, really it's about relationships. Because when they come in, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for someone that can, you know, kind of be there for them, to help them when they're going through some things. And kids now, especially teens, they're dealing with a whole different array of things. When I was growing up, my mother was working, my father wasn't there, teens now are growing up in situations where the parents are not there, and they're having to be a parent, and then having to make a decision in reference to going to school as opposed to being out in the street and selling drugs. So for the most part, when they come in, we really just try to focus on the relationship part during the course of the school year. Then during the summer, I change hats because then we do the summer employment. So for the summer employment, it's with the 14 and 15-year-olds. So then they see a different side, whereas I'm more of like an employer, but I'm trying to take them through for 6 weeks to help them to understand about punctuality. Because we also do, within the course of the youth program, we do social media, whereas they put together PSA every year that goes on WXXI. They do the storyboards, they come up with the theme. It could be about teen pregnancy, it could be about bullying. This past year, they did it in reference to the consequences of bullying. And the year before last, it kind of like really blew me away because they literally had me with a camera at a cemetery, and it was talking about the violence. Yeah. So each year is different, but it's their voice. So as we're going into our third year, it's going to be interesting to see as far as what they come, because we're in the process now getting ready to do our third PSA.
About approximately how many children have come through there?
Well, approximately last year we had a total of 37 kids.
Okay.
On any given night, we have on average we're pulling in about 14 to 15 teens.
Do these children need to live in the immediate neighborhood, or can they be in
They live in the immediate neighborhood, our
Okay.
service area, which is within 14608, 14611, and 14613
Okay.
area.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I remember my first year, I had a participant that came to the program, and her mother was bringing her to the program from the other side of Rochester, because she was just like, I need for her to be in a program that's safe.
Okay.
And for the most part, there's like 2 of the participants who technically aged out of the program, but because we've now fostered a good relationship with the 2 participants, these are 2 young men, they're actually coming back to the program and kind of like helping in the program.
Okay.
And this past year, we had one of the participants who we worked with, and he graduated from high school. That's the other thing, we asked for them to turn in their report cards. So he finished high school, and we emphasized, and I'm the type to emphasize, okay, in reference to finding another fallback, in reference to barbering, in reference to doing lawns, because we also do a community service component. And he basically did the exam for the city firefighters exam, and he's on the waiting list.
Okay.
So there are positive things happening with teens. They're just not getting the airtime as opposed as to the negative.
And that's the real crime of this whole thing. That and the other crime is that we forget that these are children.
Right.
I mean, regardless to their behavior.
And then the other thing is that what's sometimes every year there's always a situation whereas with the teens you begin to find out what they're dealing with. These are young people who are dealing with situations whereas either there's addiction,
Yes.
brokenness, or molestation. And when they, we just try to foster a safe place so they begin to open up. And then when they do open up, then we try to make sure that we, try to let them know that there are services that are available and it's nothing to feel ashamed about. But on average, there's kids that are right now struggling with a lot of trauma that's just not being addressed. Or some kids that are right now, the trend now is mental health because they're dealing with either substance abuse and mental health.
I just listened to a program just yesterday, and they were talking about lead poisoning, or lead paint and lead poisoning. And now, anyway, it's news to me, but I found out yesterday that they've been knowing about this for years, that lead poisoning has a direct correlation to criminality. And I just find it amazing that, well, when I left here 30 years ago, and when I came back, as I said, one of my grandniece just won a settlement for lead poisoning. I said, what are you talking about, man? That went out in 1950. Nobody gets lead poison anymore. Well, I was so wrong. I'm so far from the truth. I want to come back to you and your program as well. I want to come back to the opposite end because here we have a youth program and then we have the elderly. And I think that is such good synergy. I want to come back, but what I want to do is ask you, Scott, how do you feel? Okay, I mean, I know, I'm kind of thinking because I'm not saying that you're not hands-on because you're the executive director, but because I know they're in there, I can hear his passion. I hear her passion. I see how this really impacts their lives, and this is more than just a job. How does this impact you as well? I mean, because you're seeing the overall picture.
Well, sure, and now you see why I brought these two along, because you can see how passionate they are. It really, I mean, that's what keeps you going every day, to be honest with you. The administration, which is primarily what I do, it is draining. It's tough times financially and all the different issues we face. But it's the stories that I either hear from the staff or that I get to witness directly is really what keeps you going every day. My office is in the same building as the senior center, so quite honestly, when the paperwork gets to be too much and you just need to stretch, it's nice to walk through the senior center, see some friendly faces, and have some nice conversations.
Exactly.
I directly supervise the neighborhood capacity building, the organizing component, which gives me a chance really to interact with residents through that program.
Would you explain, as I said, I want to come back to you, but would you explain to us what that all entails? Because we've lost the idea, we somehow, in the 60s, community building, I mean, this was a natural thing. I mean, you didn't need a plan. I mean,
Right.
you lived there. But now, today, so would you explain
Sure.
into that?
Well, part of it is some of our connections, socially have been lost because of either schedules, because of the fear of violence and so on, transience in terms of people, living one place for 3 or 4 months, then moving, every few months. So there aren't those natural connections that I think when we look back at our own childhoods and young adulthood that a lot of us had. And so it does hurt that connection of, Mrs. Jones down the street knew if you were doing something wrong, just like your parents were. They were about to know if you didn't take care of it. So, so there are so many layers. It really is the analogy of an onion and how many layers you're peeling away. Part of what we're doing in the neighborhood work has been trying to bring voice to residents for what they genuinely want to see, but also building on the assets. What do they bring to the table? Because too often we wait for something to happen. And you need the residents to be involved not only in defining what it is that ought to happen, but helping to do the work, helping to make it happen. And we're doing that on a small grassroots level from a standpoint of creating community gardens, up to advocacy of how School 17 in the neighborhood is renovated and modernized. I'll give you a couple of examples. We're in an area that's right near the soccer stadium. And the stadium has suffered because some people said, we don't want to go down there because, look, this blighted neighborhood, we're afraid. The perception of the crime in the area is dramatically overblown to what really exists. I mean, there are crime issues, there's definitely poverty issues, but it's not to the level that some people think. But we worked with some people that formed a block club, and with some resources we were able to help get for them. They, through volunteer work and connections in the business community, took the corner right across from the soccer stadium at Smith and Broad Street, where it comes together, and have created this just gorgeous community park. I mean, it's not a park technically because the city, it's a vacant lot that the city let us do the landscaping and put some nicer sidewalks through it and create a stage and so on. But the residents, literally with rototillers and shovels were out there, and the only professional help was the mason that was hired to pour the concrete. You know, so that's an effort that right in an area that's so visible that they saw, you know, if we want the perception of this neighborhood to change, we've got to do something about this vacant lot across from the stadium.
Exactly.
Now, on a broader level, you know, the school district is going through this massive modernization program. And one of the very first schools, School 17 on Orchard Street in our neighborhood, was slated for renovations. And the original plans, the original framework was there were going to be no new gymnasiums built in any of these elementary schools that were being renovated. The problem was that this building, the gym, was on the second floor in the middle of the building. So logistically, the school never really liked having outside people in to use the gym. And the building wasn't built for community use. So it was a school first and foremost. Any community use of the facility was difficult. So we worked with residents and other stakeholders in there, and we do the after-school program in that school, and kind of rallied support going to the district and school board members and said, instead of spending $18 million and just having a fancier version of what you already had, for about $20 million, you'll build a new wing, modernize the school, and you will have a community asset that's used 365 days a year. And I'm happy to say construction is happening right now, and the gym and the multi-purpose room, cafeteria, and band rooms are all built on the first floor as an addition, which means those can easily be used on nights and weekends when the classrooms are closed. So I think community organizing, neighborhood building, it runs the gamut of a garden on a corner to how the school building is developed to be a real asset long term.
What you're talking about are the very things that sustain a community.
Yes.
And I believe that if we had this throughout several different neighborhoods, we could begin to turn this around, because as you're saying, when you talk about that side of town, everybody thinks, oh God, you're in Beirut, for God's sakes.
Right.
But it's really a small section of that area. It's basically from Saratoga Avenue or Sarasota Avenue down, you know, a few more blocks, where the real concentration, if you will, the bad guys are there. Because when you get on Parkway, as you know, I live right across the street there with my brother. I mean, this is a nice looking neighborhood for all intents and purposes. It's clean. It's not, you know, I mean, there isn't a whole lot of, you know, things that people perceive to be in that neighborhood.
I think, James, what happens is it really is a small minority of people causing the problems, but other people get scared and withdraw, and once they withdraw, that small minority is basically the one running things, at least in terms of how stuff's taken care of and why people aren't on the streets. And sometimes it creates the unintended consequences. One of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons that a lot of people favor busing kids to different schools and so on is, well, you don't have to worry about the safety issues of what if they're walking by a drug house or things like that. Well, it's a legitimate concern. But at the same time, once you take the kids off the street and the parents are down on the street looking for their kids coming home or things like that, you also just turned over those same sidewalks and streets to the people that you're afraid of.
Exactly.
So it's a balancing act, and sometimes when you try to fix one problem, you actually make it easier for the bad stuff to go on. And I think through the neighborhood program, you know, we look for ways that we can build those connections. When we had the big snowstorm a couple weeks ago, after things kind of settled down, some of the residents volunteered and went with our staff, took snow shovels and dug out bus stops, because people up and down J Street, a major bus route in that neighborhood, you couldn't get from the sidewalk to where the bus would stop without climbing through these banks of snow. Well, that's a little thing, but it sure makes it a whole lot easier for a woman trying to get on the bus not to be up to her knees in a snowbank.
And it also brings back the sense of community. And that, to me, is what's missing the most. we've lost that sense of community. I wanted to come back to you because you said something earlier. I read a book called Outliers, The True Meaning of Success. And their definition of success, to me, is the greatest definition I've ever heard. And now, after understanding that, I've actually heard you say that. Now, you may not have realized, but you just justified my concept.
Okay.
The true meaning of success, when we look at success, somehow what we call successful people or people who are successful, they always come from these obscure little towns. Somehow they always end up with these crazy stories and how they ended up getting to where it is that they got to. That is not success at all. It's selective. They were selected, whatever the case may be, that's how they got there. The true meaning of success is what you just said about how those teens in your program. The true meaning of success is the successful coming back and helping the unsuccessful, therefore obscuring failure. And that's what you're saying, that how these young people came back, although they had really graduated out of the program.
Right.
But look what they did. And then you see if we can have that and duplicate that.
Yeah, I was even surprised. One of the participants, Kenneth, he kind of like is finding his niche. He's one of the participants I've kind of watched over the last 3 years. But then he had called me last week and he said, I'm interested in, kind of shadowing the youth development specialist, Ben, to do casework. So it kind of like threw me, but at the same point in time, he's been the one that's kind of been volunteering, helping out when we've been doing activities. Because we also we have our participants work with the senior center. We have our participants sometimes do activities with the after-school program. Then the other aspect of the program is that we try to get them to kind of look outside of their situation, outside the box, because we try to do college fairs and trips of that nature. To try to let them know, because in that area, youth, because when I was growing up, we used to call certain neighborhoods a certain title or something like that. So they'll call like J Street like Ghost Town.
Okay.
So I'm like, wait a minute. When I first came over, I'm like, Ghost Town? Like, what is that? They said because at a certain time, there's only so many people are out. So I was just like, okay, y'all not schooled me on that. But when I just started to kind of take them to U of R, because we took them to U of R one time, RIT, and it was just like, you telling me that there are other kids like 18 or 17 years old or 16, in college? I'm like, yeah. And when we went to RIT, and it's like a lot of them are into the computers and social media, and we passed by one particular classroom, it was like clear glass, but everyone in there had like laptops, and the tour guide said, do you know what they're doing? And the participants that was with me was like, nah, what are they doing? They said they're developing their own computer virus, and part of the course is that they have to develop their own computer virus, and then by the end of their semester, they have to come up with a cure. I'm like, that's fascinating, but the participants at that moment, their eyes lit open like, wait a minute. And then when they found out about the financial aid, so a lot of stuff they didn't know, but the program did, and it does provide an avenue for them to learn about things that they may not be able to have an opportunity to.
To me, listening to you, this is the justification for what you do. And this is so needed. On the other side now, do the senior citizens, have they ever interacted with the young people there, or is there any synergy with that?
Oh, yes, we do joint programming at least once or twice a year.
Okay.
One time we did like the Breakfast with Santa.
Breakfast with Santa, we did it for the neighborhood and
We
community.
also had a participants one time that came over there and they served the seniors meals, and we did Wii bowling.
Wii bowling.
And being
Seniors, and the seniors won. The seniors won.
There was trash talking between the seniors and the teens,
We won.
Yeah, so yes, we definitely be collaborating whenever we can.
And I'm also seeing too, I try to present this to the school system, and they just can't get it. And don't get me wrong, I can understand that, because educators are supposed to educate, that they're really not supposed to do the social gathering, the family thing, and all of that. But we live in a different time now, and this is so very vital. And it is such a beautiful thing knowing that there is an organization tying in families in need. Because I think that it's got to be a beautiful thing. Because one of the things that I've seen is that young people have stopped respecting elderly people. And now this, in a closed environment like this, that brings that back. They get to be able to see how vital that connection is. Because first of all, if they live long enough, they're going to get old.
I think that's a misconception. I think to a certain extent that they do respect the elderly. I think that somehow, with everything that's been going on, it's been overshadowed that they don't.
Okay.
And truth be told, if you really take the time, and if people take the time to really come alongside of a teen and find out what's going on, talk to them and show them a level of respect, because that's all they want.
Exactly.
Because too many times when they're coming out of school, they're like, well, my teacher just was talking down to me, and then their whole attitude and demeanor is just gone. So when they come in, they sign in, and basically we allow them, to serve a meal, but then we give them time just to kind of talk, and then they're talking and socializing. But then when I reel them in, like, okay, we got to get ready for this activity, because every year I try to do an activity on budgeting, and I try to share some things that I've now gone through and learned over the years and how things have changed. And then when it gets to the point where I have to change gears and get ready to do the summer piece, then I'm like, okay, I'm not going to see you guys until the fall, so be safe out there. And I try to, say, listen, be doing something, be working, be doing something positive, don't be hanging out. And for, what transpired this past year, the majority of them overall came back safe and sound.
Good.
And they listened. It's like, you was right. It was kind of a little hot out there, but and then begin to, like I said, over the next couple of weeks, I'm in that mode now, whereas as we getting ready, because we only got, 4 or 5 more months, then the weather's gonna be breaking, and then to the summer. So it's like trying to just make sure they get squared away with summer employment and stuff like that.
Now, on the other end of the spectrum with the senior citizens, we've got this youth and vitality and all of this stuff going on for them. But now with the senior citizens, I mean, we're in the sunset of our lives.
Right.
So what are they doing? How do they feel about that? What are you doing in programs? And how do you reach people that are...
Our program is more like a home away from home.
Okay.
It's a family. We do tons of activities, but we have our own little core where if you need to move, we'll have seniors help you move, or as a team, we'll help you move. We take them grocery shopping. We take them out in the community. A lot of the seniors have so much knowledge. I've been there 33 years, and I've learned so much from them. They have so much knowledge to share with each other. And what I've learned from the seniors in my agency is that they are accepting of a lot of different things. When the children come in, they'll go to the children and say, take your hat off, or pull your pants up. Because it feels just a sense of, this is their ownership. These are Charles House youth. This is the sense of ownership.
And when that kind of situation happens, how does the young person react to that?
Oh, fine.
Great.
They respect, they
Good.
just accept it.
Very good.
And when they bowled against each other, it was fantastic,
And it's those types of things that somehow I wish we could have a camera so we could then show that back to the community.
Right.
Because not only does that work inside there, if we can show this to the community, we can make this work throughout the community. Because part of the reasons why I was asking more about what senior citizens are doing, because this is on the other end. Just as the young people feel left out, once you get to a certain age, I mean, you're left out of the loop for a minute here. Yes.
And financially, they don't have the finances. There's no hope for them to get a job or go to school or increase their finances. Some of them live in the high rises in the city, and the high rises have changed. They're more drug, alcohol, and everything. So their sense of being alone, having their own senior facilities are all done. So we try to make it, and as the home away from home, We're going to do whatever you need. We're going to do it no matter how we do it. And we give them hope. Because every day we hope is special. Because you never know what tomorrow's going to bring.
What's interesting on the seniors that we see is that they all come from so many different, really run the spectrum of situations. I mean, some of them are still independent in their own apartments. Some have family members in town or around. Some have nobody, they're alone. They may live in one of the high rises. Some have developmental or physical disabilities or have mental health or substance abuse past. They really come together, and when Roseanne talks about accepting, you know, they're just a community. They kind of just go with it. It doesn't really depend on what the background is. We have some Somali seniors that are coming, who many of whom barely speak any English, but as more and more refugees have relocated to the northwest quadrant of the city, you know, that's an issue that needs to be addressed. And at first we were wondering, how is this going to work? You know, these seniors, they don't speak English. You know, some of the seniors can be set in their ways in terms of, you know, certain customs. And quite honestly, the county office for aging came to us and said, we'll provide the transportation to get the Somalis to your center. We think your group of seniors will be open and receptive. And I'm happy to say it's worked. We actually are working with the Somali Center of Western New York to provide English lessons on some other space in our building. And, you know, everybody got along and, you know, in some cases have gone to special events together or been involved in arts and crafts and exercise and yoga and, you know, all those things. So it's, if you open up and sometimes just trust that the good part in people will come out, you start to see the good part of people come out.
Yes, go ahead.
I also think that with our seniors, there are seniors there who've been here 35 years. Our oldest one is 98 years old, who comes 4 days a week.
Wow.
So they have been there. They have retired, lived in the neighborhood, and they still come. And we've moved 3 times, different places. Parkway is our last site. So I just think this is their ownership.
I wanted to ask you, how do you work this place for 33 years?
I love it. I love it. There isn't a day goes by that I want to come to work. I don't even look at it as work. I guess I look at it as this is my family. And we've seen a lot of deaths and sickness and change of finance of people. A lot of different things have gone on in 33 years I've been here. And that's its a purpose. And I just love being with them, and hopefully I can make their day special.
But I wanted to ask you, do you have any children?
Yes, I have a son and a daughter.
Okay.
Daughter is going to be
In
turning
the same age group of the?
Well, my daughter's turning 14 next week,
Okay.
so she's a teenager. And when you have a daughter who's a teenager and she's on the phone a lot, that's when the hair on the back of your neck stands up as a father. And then I have a 10-year-old son, so it's. And I've been doing this type of work now, I think, going on 20 years, working with youth. And Laura had a group last week, and one of the participants that came to her meeting was actually one of the kids I used to work with when I did a youth build program years ago.
Oh, wow.
So she said, "You remember me?" I'm like, because, the gray hair, and I'm like, okay. And she said, "I was so-and-so." I'm like, okay. And then once she took me through, she said, "Yeah, I was with that particular staff person." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And she said, "Yeah, I'm still, hanging there." She said, "I remember some of the things you told me in reference to." So I was amazed. So I've found over the years, and then that being there, helping youth make it through those transitions, that's my passion. And as a parent, it's one of them things that I'm looking at the challenges that a lot of the teens are having to face. So I even be more concerned because I try to also, I guess I could say that I don't have 2 kids, I have children out there. So,
Exactly.
yeah, so.
Because that's the way that I look at this as well. I don't look at them as somebody else's children. I mean, to me, they're my children too.
Can't get away from it.
Because that's the way that I was raised as well. I like to just really commend. I've had Hillside Family of Agencies come on, and they've had several different departments come on. And I tell you, to me, that agency and the things and the work that they're doing is just fantastic with families, the whole thing that they do there. And I asked them, what is it that keeps them going? Because I know this has got to be depressing. I know that there's got to come a time when a young person breaks your heart. Or that there has to come a time when a senior citizen no longer is there. Or you're running the facility and no matter what, everything is still coming up zero. Individually, what is it that keeps you guys going, that makes you get up in the morning, push your problems aside or however you deal with them, to come in to deal with other people's situations? I'll start with you, Scott.
Well, it is the connections that you get to make either with people or through the program. Sometimes, in my case, it's what I hear through the coordinators, but I do make an effort to at least be touching base with the programs enough. As I mentioned earlier, my office is right above the senior center, so I tend to see and interact with them more often, but also through the neighborhood projects that we do. You just get to meet residents and find out that their background, their life situation may be so dramatically different than mine, but inside they're good people. There's a gentleman, a young guy that, I'll put him at maybe upper 20s, low 30s, has about a 1-year-old baby, and he's done prison time. He's from the neighborhood, but he really has done everything he can to turn his life around, and he actually started a program working in our immediate neighborhood of Josanna called Thugs and Hugs. And the whole idea was, I don't want these kids to make the same mistakes I did, that when I became a thug, why I ended up in prison. He played Santa Claus at a neighborhood Christmas party that we had. You know, I walked in and I'm thinking, who is behind that beard and everything? And he kind of pulled me aside and said, hey, it's James. And I would have never guessed behind all the costume and the beard. But he's just there, doing things like that, volunteering to run the vegetable stand that we had during summer months and so on, because he wants to make the neighborhood better and he wants to make sure kids, in essence, learn from the mistakes he did. So when you meet people like that, that's what makes you work a little harder to find the grant money or deal with those HR issues, whatever it is.
Okay.
Wow, for me, it's the Benjis, the Wallies, the Columbuses in my life who are part of our program, who've passed on or not. But it's like, how would you like going to work every day knowing you're loved? And it's every day I walk in there, it's like I am their daughter. I can make a difference in their lives. I love to be creative and offering them different opportunities. But just imagine going to work every day and knowing you're loved.
Oh, you can't get any better than that.
I just think it's great.
You can't get any better than that. I don't know how you're going to top that answer.
Nah, for me, it's 365 days a year. I could be at the store, at the mall, and I may bump into one of my kids or bump into a participant I worked with years ago. And then, yes, it does get, be tiring, but it's grassroots work. It's not for everybody. And that means grassroots work. That means you got to be flexible. You got to be willing to roll your sleeves up, step outside of, okay, well, yeah, I'm a program coordinator, but if I have to sweep something up in the reference, that's what you got to do. That's grassroots. But there's those moments, and whereas for me it was like last week when I bumped into a participant I haven't seen in over 10 years, and she remembered. And those values and just that time that I took with her and that year that I worked with her, it carried her through to help her to be a better mother and understand.
I just want to stop you there. But isn't that amazing? I mean, just taking the time to do whatever it was, that interaction, that human interaction that you had with this individual.
And she was rough.
And knowing now that you, the impact that you had on her life and to where she is now, I mean, I think, I personally believe that that's what we're here on this planet to do. You know, we've confused the word used to mean abused. But in my mind, we're here to be used. That's our purpose. That's what connects us, is our usefulness. When you're no longer useful, I mean, you need to get out of here. But what has happened is that we have associated the word abuse along with use. And so now when we hear the word use, we back away from that because we associate it that it means that we're going to be abused. But here is a prime example of how you were used to make an individual's life better. And I mean, you can't get any better than that.
Well, when we look back at our own childhoods, I mean, besides our family and close friends, chances are the people that you'll remember was, you know, a teacher that went out of the way and you had some sort of bond beyond just the textbook. Or it'll be a Little League coach or a scout leader or a youth group, you know, somebody where there was an actual personal connection that instilled some values in you that hopefully you're kind of, you know, to use that cliche, paying it forward. But I think it's those relationships that when we really look back, that's what we remember. The people we remember were because there was a connection. And I think in different ways, you know, whether Calvin and youth staff are doing it with youth or Roseanne is doing it with seniors and their family members, you know, it's how do you make the connection, not just the service you provide.
Now, on the other side of the spectrum, what would have been some of your saddest times? I mean, a sad moment for you? Because I know they can break your heart. Just as much as they can give you that love, they can also break your heart.
Sad moment, I would say that someone along the way had kind of like, I would say, bursted my bubble, whereas they said, Calvin, you're not going to be able to save everybody. And because I remember years of doing human service work, like I wanted to save everyone. And it got to a point where, as I said, you're not going to be able to save everybody. And it was during a time where there was a participant I worked with, and he was in a gang. And he came out of the gang from Syracuse. And unfortunately, he ended up going back to Syracuse one weekend, and he ended up being a victim of homicide. And it was one of them situations I'm like, you know, why? But in the midst of it, I did have a chance to kind of work with him, and he was making inroads to turn things around. But then there's those situations, sometimes, you know, the streets and that pull of the fast life and the money and all of that stuff. I mean, so in the trenches, you try to do the best that you can and reach those who will receive it and go forward with it. And that's what keeps me going. And then when I get to the point I get a little bit discouraged, I'm like, okay, this is a lot of work. And then there's those little moments where it's like, okay, I see another face that I've now forgotten, but I've made inroads with years ago. And it's like, okay, you can keep doing this for a little while longer. Now that's for me. But yeah, there's those moments.
Do you have those moments?
Yeah, I've had seniors die in my arms.
Oh, God.
I have found them dead in their home.
Oh, my.
We had a situation in December where one of our seniors died at the senior center. But that's the horrible part.
And the reason why I ask you that is because I want the viewing audience to see that you're human, you know, and that you're ordinary people doing extraordinary things. See, we look at you people and the viewing audience or listen to the work that you're doing, and they're thinking that now you're superheroes. You have X-ray vision, you can fly, and all of those wonderful things, because that's the only way someone could do this work. See, that's what we have in our minds. We could never do that. And what I want people to see, that you're ordinary, everyday people getting up like the rest of us, putting one foot in front of the other. The only difference is that your job consists of interacting directly and touching people. And for me, I can't think of a better business to be in. I just think that this is what we're here for, and I find it to be so discouraging when we repel each other or we will not reach our hand out to help one another. And I take my hat off to what it is that you're doing here. And from the moment that I came back to Rochester and I lived with my brother and I looked at your building across the street from his house, and I wondered, what is that? Okay, I mean, that wasn't here when I left. What are they doing in there? And my brother, because he works, he's the manager at Lily Cafe, at the wine, the Maplewood wine. And he told me that you do a lot of the work that they're doing over there as well. And now he's a little upset with me because I was supposed to tape them too, but I did you before I did him. Okay, so I might have to come over there myself to hide out. But I wanted to thank you so much. Before I let you go, is there a website that we can go to?
There is www.charlesettlementhouse.org.
Okay.
So
And a phone number?
easiest number is 277-0810 is our main number where my office is located. And,
Okay.
and that's on the website, and we're in the book at numbers for each of our buildings.
And would you tell us what it is that you do one more time and how people can get in touch with you? If I have a child, and let me ask you this. If I have a child that I'm having a hard time with, can I bring this child to you, or is there a process that I have to do before I can get my child?
Process is to give me a call.
Okay.
And I will find out and listen to whatever's going on and try to point you in the right direction. If it's services that I can provide, then I can do that.
Is there a direct number for you?
That number would be 528-2442.
Okay. And the same thing with senior citizens?
My line is 277-0813.
And if I have...
As long as you're 60, you can come on down.
Okay. And that applies to anyone across the board?
Monroe County, anyone in Monroe
Do they
County.
need to have someone bring them in? Or for instance, let's say the viewing audience watch this show, and can they come in and say, I saw this on the show, I'm a senior, I want to
They can just
participate?
come in Monday through Friday. I'm there
Okay.
from 7 a.m. until 4.
Are there any closing remarks that you would like to say to this community?
I think it's just that we do get caught up in the bad, and there are a lot of, Rochester actually has a lot of services and programs to help. The best thing in my mind people can do is roll up their sleeves, whether it's by volunteering, whether it's giving money, and working with people, and we can kind of all help each other, and I think we'll have a better, stronger community.
I just want the community not to forget the seniors.
Very good. I agree with that too, because now being a senior, but
Right.
I think too, once again in the book that I was mentioning to you about outliers, there were a group of immigrants that came from Italy that moved into this little small town in Pennsylvania, and they named the small town after the little town that they came from in Italy. Well, an outside doctor came in because he knew the doctor inside the village. And one of the things, as they were eating dinner, the local doctor says, it's an amazing thing here. People here die of old age. And the other doctor says, man, that's impossible. How can everybody die of old age? Well, the outside doctor brought his team of technicians in and the whole 9 yards. They did blood tests. They were trying to do everything to find out what was making these people live so long. Because they were doing the same thing the rest of us would do. They were drinking, they were smoking, but what was different was the manner and how they lived and who they lived with. It was not uncommon to find 3 generations still all under the same roof. it was not uncommon to see the elderly holding court, if you will, in their village, and everyone respecting their opinions because of how they got there. My mother used to say, "You don't get old by being a fool." So with age comes some wisdom, well, hopefully. So I can definitely appreciate what you're talking about, because somehow I mean, on the one end, on the one spectrum, what you're dealing with, because you're young, we pay no attention to you. You don't count yet. And then on the other end of the spectrum, well, now you're too old to count.
Right.
So just go over into the corner and whatever happens to you, happens to you. And it's a beautiful thing knowing that we have a community, or we have organizations like this in this community that can absorb people who may have been forgotten, may have been passed by. And I'll leave you with the last word.
What teens are looking for, they're looking for relationships. Positive, healthy relationships. That's all they need, not to be judged.
That's a beautiful thing. I thank you so very much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I can't thank you enough on behalf of this community. You're going to start seeing more of me over there now.
Great.
And I'm just so deeply impressed, and I'm honored to say that I know you and live across the street from you. I might as well take that in too. But I'm just really, really impressed, and I'm hoping that when the viewers see this show, that we will get more responses and more volunteers, more people coming in to really give more vitality to this show. I thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Sometimes our light goes out, but is blown back to flames by another human being. Each of us owes deepest thanks to those who have rekindled this light.